Lecture 43, Faulting and Stress Magnitudes. Numerous observations suggest that the stresses in the crust are in a state of frictional equilibrium. This means that the frictional resistive forces on existing faults, and the tectonic and other forces are in a delicate balance. Three independent lines of evidence indicate this. The occurrence of seismicity induced by reservoir impoundment by dam construction, or fluid injection. Earthquakes triggered by other earthquakes. And measured stress states in the upper crust, which are consistent with the Coulomb criterion and observed frictional coefficients. This figure shows stress measurements in the KTB deep borehole in Germany. The measured stresses to a depth of about 8 kilometers are quite high and consistent with the frictional faulting theory, which a frictional coefficient of about 0.7. Further evidence for such a frictional failure stress state is provided by the fact that a series of earthquakes could be triggered at about 9 kilometers depth, with very low perturbations of the pore pressure. This figure shows a compilation of stress measurements in relatively deep wells and boreholes in various parts of the world. As shown, the dependence of differential stress on the effective mean stress corresponds to a crust in frictional failure equilibrium, with a coefficient of friction ranging between 0.6 and 1.0. In order to get some feeling for the magnitudes of the principal stresses, under conditions of frictional equilibrium, let's analyze the conditions for renewed movement to occur. Let's use a phi s of 30 degrees. For a normal fault, sigma 1 is vertical. If the vertical component of stress at a depth of 1 km is 24 megapascals, sigma 3 should be 8 megapascals for renewed slip. Thus, a modest reduction of the horizontal stress is required for renewed slip. In a similar way, we can determine the conditions for slip at depths of 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 kilometers. For thrust faults, sigma 3 is vertical, and at a depth of 1 km, its magnitude is the same 24 megapascals. For renewed slip, the magnitude of sigma 1 is then 72 megapascals. Therefore, a considerable increase in the horizontal stress is required for renewed movement to occur. Similarly, we can find the stress conditions at greater depths. Notice that the differential stress, the size of the Mohr circle, for thrusting, is much larger than for normal faulting. For a strike-slip fault, sigma 2 is vertical, and there is a range of possibilities. All that is required is that the vertical stress has a magnitude intermediate between sigma 1 and sigma 3. We can express the relative value of sigma 2 by using the ratio k. The conditions for renewed slip for k equal to 0.5 are shown in this figure, for depths of 1 to 4 kilometers. In this special case, the magnitude of sigma 2 coincides with the center of the Mohr circle. These results clearly show that the resistance to slip increases with depth for all three types of faults, and that at any given depth, it is the least for normal faults, and the greatest for thrust faults. For renewed sliding, the relationship between the two principal stresses on an optimum plane is given by this equation. The ratio between the two principal stresses, for any plane that makes an angle beta with respect to sigma 1, is given by this equation, which is plotted here, for a μs of 0.6. R reaches a maximum value of 3.1, on a plane at 30 degrees from sigma 1. The values of sigma 1 and sigma 3, that correspond to the situation where a critically oriented fault is at the frictional limit, are given by this equation. Taking into account the pore pressure, P, the equation looks like this, which for normal, strike-slip, and thrust faulting regimes, is equivalent to these equations. If μs is equal to 0.6, the equations reduce to this. These equations are plotted here, for a normal faulting regime in A, a strike-slip regime in B, and a thrust regime in C. In the graphs, the pore pressure is hydrostatic, and is represented by the blue line. The lithostatic pressure is 23 megapascals per kilometer, and is represented by the green line. The critical sigma h for normal faulting, or sigma capital H for strike slip or thrust faulting, are shown by the red line. These are computed from the equations. As you can see, the resistance to slip increases with depth for all three types of faults, and at any given depth, it is the least for normal faults, and the greatest for thrust faults. What happens if we have overpressure? This is illustrated here, for the pressure versus depth profile indicated by the blue line. The lithostatic pressure is the same 23 megapascals per kilometer, and is represented by the green line. The red line indicates the critical sigma h for normal faulting, or sigma capital H for strike slip or thrust faulting. Notice that as the pore pressure approaches sigma v, at great depth, the limiting strength magnitudes, represented by the red curves, are not significantly different from the vertical stress, regardless of whether it is a normal, strike slip, or thrust fault. When pore pressure is very high, fault slip will occur on well-oriented faults, when there is only a small difference between the maximum and minimum principal stresses. This is further illustrated by this figure. When stress magnitudes are controlled by the frictional strength of faults, as pore pressure increases, the maximum size of the Mohr circle decreases. In other words, as pore pressure gets higher and higher, faulting occurs with smaller and smaller differences between the maximum and minimum effective principal stress. To learn more about this topic, read these sections from Reagan and answer these questions.